Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're locked in on a really fascinating upcoming Major League Soccer match.
Yeah, it's Columbus Crew versus Inter Miami CF. That's
Yeah.
April 19th, 2025.
Right, and it's at TCF Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. We've got this really comprehensive analysis report in front of us.
Uh-huh. It's got everything, stats, injuries, predictive models.
Market insights, even tactical recommendations. It's pretty detailed.
Definitely.
So our mission today for you listening is basically to cut through all that noise. We want to pull out the key insights.
Give you a clear picture of what to expect.
Exactly, from, the conditions on the pitch, potential betting angles, maybe some of the strategic stuff we might see playing out.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Okay, let's unpack this, and maybe the best place to start is the weather. It can always throw a wrench in the works, can it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the report gives us a pretty decent idea of what Minneapolis will be like. We're looking at temps around, say, 62 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, not too bad.
But the real feel is similar, maybe just a tad warmer. The big thing, though, is the sky. It's going to be cloudy.
Uh-huh.
And there's pretty good chance of showers, maybe even a thunderstorm.
And it sounds like it could get windy, too.
Yeah, southwest winds about 7 miles per hour. But the report mentions gusts potentially hitting 21 miles per hour.
Wow.
Plus, you've got high humidity, like 90%.
90%.
And a 65% chance of precipitation, 100% cloud cover. It's significant.
Sounds like the kind of day where the elements themselves are like another player on the field.
Exactly. And the analysts actually put in a specific impact note about this.
Oh, yeah. What's that say?
It's just that these wet and windy conditions, they might really hinder teams that rely on, fast, intricate build-up play.
Right, passing through midfield quickly.
Precisely. Instead, it could favor teams strong on set pieces, good in the air,
Makes sense.
and teams with really disciplined, organized defenses.
Okay, so this weather forecast could seriously shape how both Columbus and Miami approach this match. How might it specifically affect each team, do you think?
Well, take Columbus. If they usually rely on those quick, slick passes to build attacks, a wet pitch could definitely slow that down, makes those quick transitions harder, maybe disrupts those neat passing sequences.
Yeah, heavy pitch.
But on the flip side, if they've got players who are strong in aerial duels,
Right.
those gusty winds could make crosses and set pieces really unpredictable for the Miami defense. Could create chances there.
That makes a lot of sense. A slippery ball, swirling wind, defending high balls becomes a nightmare.
Definitely.
What about Inter Miami then? How might they deal with these conditions?
Well, given the potential for a slower game, maybe more physical,
Yeah.
a team looking to sit back a bit, absorb pressure, which, as we'll get into, the report kind of hints Miami might do, could actually find it beneficial.
How so?
The tricky conditions might make it harder for Columbus to break them down with intricate passing, like we said. Plus, any quick counterattacks Miami launches could be even more effective, maybe, if the pitch gets heavy and players start tiring.
Right, exploiting space on the break. Okay, so the weather definitely adds an interesting layer here. Let's shift gears, though. How have the teams actually been performing lately, weather aside? What's their recent form look like?
Looking at their last 5 games, both are actually coming in pretty hot.
Oh, yeah.
Columbus has gone win-win, draw, draw, win.
Okay, solid.
And Inter Miami isn't far off. Win, 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 draw, draw.
3 wins, then 2 draws. Also very solid, so just based on results, not much to split them recently?
Not really, no. Very similar runs of form.
All right, let's dig a bit deeper than just wins and losses. What about some key performance metrics?
Yeah, when we look at the stats, it stays pretty tight. Columbus averages about 2.25 points per game recently.
Okay.
Miami's just behind at 2.14 points per game.
Pretty close.
And interestingly, both teams have scored the exact same number of goals in those recent matches, 12 each.
12 goals each, wow.
And they've conceded the same number too, 6 goals against each.
Okay, identical attack and defense, numbers-wise, over that stretch. That's quite something.
It is. The one slight difference is clean sheets. Columbus managed a clean sheet in 50% of those games.
Half their games, no goals conceded.
Right. Miami's rate is a bit lower at 33%, so 1 in 3 games.
So for you keeping score, Columbus has a tiny edge in points per game, a better recent clean sheet record, but otherwise really evenly matched on basic goals for and against.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, let's talk expected goals, XG. Always fascinating. For anyone new, XG kind of measures the quality of chances created and conceded. What are those numbers telling us?
Right. So Columbus has an XG for expected goals of 1.64.
Meaning they typically create chances worth about 1.6 goals per game.
Exactly. Based on historical data, Miami's XG4 is a little lower, 1.54.
Still pretty decent.
Defensively, Columbus's XG against is 1.26, so they tend to give up chances worth about that many goals.
Okay.
Miami's XG against is a bit higher, 1.45.
So they concede slightly higher quality chances on average.
That's what the numbers suggest, yeah.
Okay, so what's the main takeaway for us from these XG figures?
Well, the key thing here, I think, is that Columbus shows a slightly better edge in both creating good chances and preventing them compared to Miami in these recent games.
Right, that difference you mentioned.
Yeah, their XG difference, that's just XG, for minus XG against is plus 0.38 for Columbus.
Positive, meaning they create more than they concede quality-wise.
Correct. Miami's is also positive, but only just. Plus 0.09.
Ah, okay. So Columbus's underlying performance based on chance quality looks a bit stronger by that metric.
It does suggest that, yes. But of course, these are just averages. One game can always be different.
Absolutely. And speaking of things that can really impact a single game, injuries. Let's look at the injury report. Who might be missing?
Okay, for Columbus Crew, the report lists 3 players out.
3. Who are they?
Forward Lassie Labalainen has a hip problem. Goalkeeper Nicholas Hagen is out with a hand injury. And defender Rudy Camacho has a thigh issue.
Key positions there. Forward, keeper, defender. How might those absences impact Columbus?
Well, Lapalainen out could limit their attacking options. Maybe pace or creativity from the wing, depending on his role.
Okay.
The keeper injury means a backup steps in, which is sometimes, affect confidence or stability at the back.
Sure.
But maybe the biggest concern is Camacho, the defender. Losing a starting defender could really test their depth back there. Might force a reshuffle, put extra pressure on others.
Yeah, not ideal for Columbus, losing players in those key areas. What about Inter Miami's injury list?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. Stark contrast.
Ow.
The report says Inter Miami has 0 reported injuries or suspensions. None at all.
Wow, a completely clean bill of health. That's a huge advantage, isn't it?
It certainly is. Having everyone available gives them full tactical flexibility.
Yeah.
They can put out their strongest lineup, no enforced changes, no worries about players carrying knocks. Could be particularly useful if those weather conditions do turn out to be as challenging as forecast. Having fresh legs and options helps.
Definitely. Okay, so we've got the weather picture, team form, key stats, the injury situation. Now, let's get into the predictions. What are the different data models saying might happen?
Right, the analysis used a few different approaches. First up, a Poisson regression model.
Poisson, okay, that often looks at goal scoring rates, right?
Exactly. It predicts the likely number of goals based on historical scoring. And this model, it strongly favors Columbus.
How strong?
It predicts Columbus scoring about 1.45 goals compared to just 0.26 for Inter Miami.
0.26. That's really low for Miami. So a clear Columbus win, according to Poisson.
Very much so. But then things get interesting.
Go on.
A neural network model, basically a smart algorithm looking for complex patterns, it came to a different conclusion. It predicts a draw.
A draw. Okay, conflicting signals already.
And then there's a stacked ensemble model. This one's clever. It combines predictions from several other models.
Like a wisdom of the crowd approach for models.
Sort of, yeah. It uses a random forest, a gradient boosting machine, and that neural network we just mentioned that combines them for a more balanced view.
And it's very...
Also leaning towards a draw.
Okay, so one model says strong Columbus win. 2 models say draw. That's quite a spread. What about the Monte Carlo simulation? That's usually a big one.
It is. And this one ran, get this, 10,000 simulated matches.
10,000?
Yeah, varying factors within realistic ranges to see what happens most often.
Oh, wow.
And its results, pretty clear.
What did it find?
Columbus win probability, 67.5%.
Wow, over 2/3 chance.
Draw probability, 25.4%, so about a 1 in 4 chance.
Okay.
And an Inter Miami win, only a 7.1% probability according to the simulations.
7%. That's really low. So the Monte Carlo paints Columbus as heavy favorites. Why the big difference between models, though? Poisson says Columbus, Neural Net and Ensemble say draw. Monte Carlo says strong Columbus.
It comes down to how they work. Different models use different assumptions, weigh data differently. Poisson focuses heavily on goal rates.
Right.
Neural networks find complex patterns but can be sensitive to the specific data they learn from. The ensemble tries to balance things out.
And the Monte Carlo.
By running so many simulations, it gives a probabilistic view across many potential scenarios. The fact it leans so heavily towards Columbus likely reflects those slightly better underlying metrics we saw earlier, playing out consistently over thousands of trials.
That helps make sense of it. So despite some variation, that big Monte Carlo simulation gives the strongest statistical push towards a Columbus win.
It seems to, yeah.
Let's get even more specific then. What about the most probable score lines the report identified?
Okay, the single most likely scoreline, according to the analysis, is 1-0 to Columbus. Probability is 26.2%.
1-0 Columbus. Okay, makes sense given the data.
Yeah.
What's next?
Next most likely is 2-0 to Columbus at 18.6%.
Also Columbus winning to 0.
Then a 0-0 draw comes in at 17.7%.
Interesting. Goalless draw. Still quite high probability.
Followed by 3-0 Columbus at 9.0%, and then a 1-1 draw at 6.8%.
So for you listening, notice the pattern. Lots of predicted Columbus wins, often without conceding. And the draws predicted are either goalless or low scoring.
Exactly. And there was that specific note about Miami's scoring chances, tying back to the Poisson model, too.
Right. You mentioned their expected goals were very low in that model.
Yeah, the overall analysis projects Inter Miami to score under 0.3 goals in this match across the models.
Under 0.3 goals.
Which naturally significantly boosts the probability of Columbus keeping that clean sheet.
So based purely on the data, a Columbus win without conceding looks like a really strong possibility.
That's what the numbers point towards.
Okay, let's switch focus slightly. How does all this translate to the betting markets? What insights does the report offer there?
Right, so the opening odds had Columbus as favorites, but maybe not as strong as the simulations suggest. Odds were 2.25 for a Columbus win.
Okay, what does 2.25 imply in probability terms?
That implies about a 44.4% chance of a Columbus win, according to the bookies.
44%. And the draw and Miami win?
Both were priced identically at 3.3.
Which translates to?
About a 30.3% chance for a draw and a 30.3% chance for a Miami win.
Okay, so the market sees Miami and the draw as equally likely, and Columbus as favorites, but only around 44%. How does that compare to the Monte Carlo true probabilities?
This is where it gets really interesting. Remember, Monte Carlo gave Columbus a 67.5% win chance.
Way higher than the market's 44.4%.
Exactly. The simulation put the draw probability at 25.4%.
Lower than the market's 30.3%.
And the Miami win probability was just 7.1% in the simulation.
Versus over 30% implied by the odds. Big difference there.
Huge difference. So the main takeaway is that the betting market seems to be significantly underestimating Columbus's likelihood of winning based on this analysis.
So if the market is undervaluing Columbus according to our data, does that suggest any potential betting opportunities?
It certainly could. Based on that discrepancy, the report suggests backing Columbus to win outright at those 2.25 odds could offer value.
Makes sense. Anything else?
Well, given Miami's really low projected goal output, betting on Columbus win to 0 could also be attractive.
Right. Columbus wins and keeps a clean sheet.
Yeah. And the most probable correct scores, according to the models 1-0 or 2-0 to Columbus, align with that idea too.
What about covering the draw? A couple of models liked it, and the Monte Carlo still gave it a 25% chance.
Good point. The report does mention considering a small hedge on a draw. Specifically, maybe the 0-0 or 1-1 score lines.
Like a bit of insurance.
Kind of, yeah. Especially with unpredictable weather, sometimes games just tighten up and end level. It mitigates some risk.
And what about betting on Miami to pull off the upset win?
The advice there is pretty clear. Exercise caution. Probably avoid betting on an outright Miami victory.
Because the simulation probability is so low compared to the odds?
Exactly. The data just doesn't support it as a likely outcome, even if the odds seem tempting.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes perfect sense based on everything we've seen. So, moving beyond predictions and betting, what about tactical recommendations? What does the report suggest for the coaches?
For Columbus, the advice is basically lean into your advantages, use the home field advantage, even though it's neutral Minneapolis. They're the designated home team here.
Right.
And crucially, look to exploit aerial duels, especially with that wind and potential rain.
So maybe more focus on set pieces,
Of course.
crosses.
Could be. Maybe even a slightly more direct approach at times, rather than trying intricate passing on a potentially dodgy pitch.
Okay. And for Inter Miami, the underdog, according to the data.
For Miami, the suggestion leans towards a more conservative game plan.
Meaning?
Maybe sit a bit deeper defensively, focus on being really organized, compact, hard to break down.
Deny Columbus space.
Exactly. And then look for chances to hit them quickly on the counterattack when they win the ball back.
Play for a point, maybe?
Given the probabilities, aiming for a draw, securing a point might be seen as a pragmatic strategic goal for them in this specific matchup.
Okay, right. Let's try and bring all this together then. Summarize the key takeaways for everyone listening.
Okay, so Columbus comes in as the statistical favorite. That's based on slightly stronger underlying metrics, the potential weather impact favoring maybe a more physical game, and that theoretical home advantage.
And it's a potentially big, but those injuries, especially in defense and goal, add a real layer of uncertainty for them.
Absolutely. And while the predictive models weren't unanimous,
No, we had draws predicted too.
right, but that big Monte Carlo simulation, running thousands of games, strongly pointed towards a Columbus win as the most likely result.
Though the draw is still a significant possibility, around 25% chance. Shouldn't be ignored.
Definitely not. And fascinatingly, the betting market seems to be offering odds that undervalue Columbus's win probability compared to our analysis.
Creating potential value there or on a Columbus win-to-nil bet. And tactically, it looks like Columbus might try to use the conditions and aerial strength, maybe be a bit more direct, while Miami might set up to be solid, defend deep, and hit on the break, possibly aiming for that draw.
Yeah, it really sets up an intriguing tactical battle, especially with Miami having a full squad available versus Columbus dealing with those key absences.
It really does. Fascinating stuff. So, considering that high probability we saw for a Columbus win-to-nil and the tactical advice for Miami maybe playing defensively for a point,
Mhm.
here's something to think about, listener.
Mhm.
How might Inter Miami's tactical approach being organized, maybe frustrating Columbus, even with no injuries of their own, how might that actually disrupt Columbus's statistical advantage? What other factors, things beyond the numbers we've talked about?
Like individual brilliance, a refereeing call.
Exactly, or just that inherent chaos of football, especially in potentially bad weather. What unexpected things might swing the result? It's a good reminder, isn't it? Data gives us a great framework.
But the game itself always holds surprises.
Always. That's what makes it captivating. Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.